Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. A retired sheriff buys a forgotten Texas ranch for peace and quiet, but finds himself in a war against a corrupt HOA hell-bent on stealing his land. What begins with forged papers and quiet threats erupts into a full-blown battle for justice, land, and one man's legacy. I wasn't looking for a fight. Hell, after 23 years wearing the badge in Hamilton County, I'd had my fill of fights, some bloody, most bureaucratic, and all of them exhausting. What I wanted was silence, space, a place where the only things barking orders were the wind and my dogs. That place turned out to be 160 acres of overgrown scrubland, a collapsed barn, and a rotting farmhouse that hadn't seen electricity or dignity in at least 5 years. I bought it through a bankruptcy auction straight from the county clerk's office. Clean title, no liens, no neighbors for a quarter mile in 3 directions. Exactly what I wanted, exactly what I needed. Rachel, bless her, didn't bat an eye when I pulled up the aerial maps and said, we could build something here, a home, a kennel, maybe even some peace. The day we moved in was hotter than a snake's backside on a skillet. August in Central Texas has a way of baptizing you in sweat, whether you like it or not. We pulled up in my old Ford F-350, trailer full of tools, food, and our 3 German Shepherds, Ranger, Cassie, and Boone, panting like they'd just run laps around the sun. The house looked even worse in person than it did on the listing. Windows boarded, porch half collapsed, and the front door hanging open like it had finally given up, waiting for someone to come home. But it was ours. Every weed-choked acre of it. First thing I did was swap the gate lock. No sense in pretending folks wouldn't get curious. Then I started mounting trail cams along the eastern fence line and the south approach, near the only road wide enough for vehicle access. The place had been abandoned since the old owner died last winter, and I knew how folks around here treated land without a visible presence, like buffet trays. That night we camped in the living room, no lights except battery lanterns, no AC. But damn, it was quiet. No sirens, no radios, just coyotes in the distance, and Boone snoring next to my cot like a busted chainsaw. The next couple of days were simple. Unload, assess, plan. Rachel cleaned out the kitchen while I cleared brush around the main house and reinforced the side gate. I met one neighbor, sort of. An old rancher named Jed rolled up in a battered Ram with a cooler of Lone Stars and a glance that said he'd seen things worse than me. We shared a drink on the tailgate while the dog sniffed his tires. You get this place through county? He asked, popping a bottle cap with his molars. Yeah, probate auction, he nodded. You talked to West Hollow Ridge. Who? He just chuckled, took a swig, and muttered, You will. I didn't have time to dwell on his cryptic nonsense because on the 3rd morning, still no electricity, mind you, I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard in years. The heavy diesel growl of multiple engines idling like they owned the damn earth. I stepped out onto the porch in my boots and undershirt, and sure as hell, 5 trucks were parked just outside the locked gate. 2 concrete mixers, a flatbed with rebar, a skid loader, and a brand new Ford with a magnetic decal that said West Hollow Ridge Development Committee. 2 guys in vests and hard hats were already unfolding a site plan on the hood of the truck. One of them waved when he saw me like I was the groundskeeper or something. Morning, you Ellis McBain. Who's asking? Greg Lowry, site supervisor. We're here to prep the trail for the wellness center. Gonna break ground by the creek. I stared at him, then at the papers in his hand, then at the locked gate, the no trespassing signs I'd hung on day 1, and finally back at his smug little clipboard. This is my land, I said slowly, making sure each word had weight. All of it. Bought it legally. Gates locked for a reason. He smiled, the kind of tight, professional smile that usually means someone's about to lie. We've got a right of access permit issued through the West Hollow Ridge HOA. Property was designated as Expansion Reserve years ago. This is part of Phase 3, Wellness Center, Spa Complex, Trail Corridor. You should have gotten the packet. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe the size of the balls it took to roll up to a man's front gate and start laying concrete on his land. I didn't get any packet, Greg. What I got was a recorded deed, a clean title, and 160 acres that belong to me and nobody else. You and your trucks have 60 seconds to turn around. He blinked. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Yeah, I said. You misunderstood that this ain't your sandbox." That's when the SUV showed up, sleek, dark gray, and trying way too hard to look expensive. It kicked up a plume of dust as it slid to a stop beside the trucks. Out stepped a woman in heels, a linen pantsuit, and a silver clipboard, because of course she had a damn clipboard. "I'm Grace Vanderlee," she said, brushing invisible dust off her sleeve. "President of the West Hollow Ridge Homeowners Association. I believe we need to have a conversation." "No, ma'am," I said. "We really don't." She arched an eyebrow. "Then let me be clear. Under Texas Community Development Statute, if a parcel is left unused, unfenced, and falls into significant disrepair, the governing HOA may assert custodial stewardship until—" I turned on my heel and walked back toward the house. "You can't just ignore legal precedent," she shouted after me. I stepped inside, clicked open the gun safe, grabbed my duty megaphone from the old patrol days, and unclipped the harnesses on my dogs. Boone and Ranger were already at the door by the time I stepped out again, siren in one hand, megaphone in the other. "Attention," I said into the speaker. "You are trespassing on private property. You have 5 minutes to vacate. Video recording is in progress. This is your only warning." Boone started growling low and deep, eyes locked on the trucks. Ranger barked once, short, sharp, and loud enough to make the guy in the vest drop his clipboard. I pulled out my phone and dialed. "Hey Cliff, it's Mac. Got 5 trucks and an HOA caravan trying to start construction on my porch. Want to come down here and remind him how trespassing works." 2 days after I sent that caravan of cement-slinging intruders packing, I figured the worst of it was over. My gate was still locked, the dogs were calm, and no one had tried to bulldoze my property again. For a brief moment, I thought maybe Grace and her HOA goons had taken the hint. That fantasy lasted right up until the county deputy showed up with a manila envelope in one hand and an apologetic look in the other. "Sorry to bring this out personally, Mac," he said, handing it over. "HOA filed a motion in district court this morning. You're being summoned." The words on the front, "Petition to invalidate transfer of real property," hit me like a brick. I stood on the porch in my work boots, still holding a bag of dog food under one arm, and read the first paragraph while Boone sniffed the deputy's boots. My name, my property's parcel number, and a list of claims that looked like they'd been pulled out of a magician's ass. The gist of it? West Hollow Ridge HOA was formally alleging that my acquisition of the land had been unlawful due to a contractual encumbrance predating the county auction. They claimed the HOA had been granted right of first refusal on the property when the previous owner went into debt, and that my title should be considered null and void. Buried in the attachments was a scanned document with the old owner's name, a shaky signature, and a notarized stamp that looked about as real as a $3 bill. Only problem, I knew for a fact that man had died 6 months before that signature was supposedly made. Rachel looked up from the porch swing, saw the expression on my face, and didn't even ask. She just went inside and came back with whiskey. I called Carol Dunham the next morning. She was a real estate attorney out of Waco, sharp as broken glass, and twice as dangerous. I knew her from a wrongful seizure case she helped us on back in my sheriff days. When I gave her the details, she let out a low whistle and said, "Oh, honey, they're not just bluffing. They're playing dirty." By lunchtime, I had a folder of scanned documents, my deed, the county auction log, and everything else I could think of. Carol told me to get ready to dig in. This was going to be a full-scale forensic audit. She also gave me a single piece of advice I took to heart. Find out who filed the original encumbrance. If the HOA claims they had right of first refusal, someone in that county office helped them plant it. That night, I made a call to my old partner, Trevor Collins, now working in the investigations division up in Austin. He owed me a favor, and I cashed it in. "Start with the bankruptcy trustee," I said. "See if he's had prior contact with HOA legal firms or any ties to West Hollow Ridge. I'll cover your beer tab for the rest of the year." Next morning, Trevor sent me a list of calls between the trustee's office and a small legal outfit called Callow and Dent, registered as general counsel for, you guessed it, West Hollow Ridge. 3 calls made in the same week, the HOA claimed their right of first refusal was triggered. No logs in the official county communication archive. He followed up with a bombshell. The trustee's assistant had recently bought a new truck, paid in full, with a cashier's check. Bet your ass it wasn't his birthday, Trevor said. Carol's paralegal did a deep dive on the notary listed on the refusal contract and found she had lost her license 2 years prior. The stamp on the document expired. That made the whole thing not just invalid, but criminally fraudulent. At this point, Carol was already drafting a motion to dismiss the HOA's claim with prejudice. But she wasn't stopping there. She wanted blood, or at the very least, sanctions. Max, she said, this isn't just about your land. If they get away with this, they'll use the same tactic on someone else. We need to expose how deep this rot goes. We were still assembling our counterpunch when I got a knock at the gate late in the afternoon. I figured it was another delivery, or maybe a neighbor coming to gossip. Nope, it was Grace. Same pantsuit, same clipboard, same dead-eyed smile. I didn't open the gate. Just stood on my side of the bars, arms crossed, dogs at my heels. I assume you've been served, she said, as if this were a casual social call. You bet. And I assume you know that document you're trying to pass off has a dead man's signature and a notary who hasn't existed legally since the last administration. She didn't even flinch. I'm simply protecting the integrity of the community. You bought land that was meant to be part of West Hollow Ridge. It was always meant to be part of us. I laughed. Actually laughed. Lady, this place was a ranch before your subdivision even had sewer lines. You don't own history and you damn sure don't own mine. Grace narrowed her eyes. You should consider a settlement. You won't win this, Mr. McBain. You may have worn a badge, but you're not above HOA law. That was the moment I realized what I was dealing with wasn't just overreach. It was entitlement weaponized. Grace and her people weren't trying to negotiate. They were laying the groundwork for a hostile land takeover, one fraudulent page at a time. When she finally left, I called Trevor again and said, "We're going to need everything. Dig deeper. I want to know if anyone inside the county recorder's office has ties to HOA vendors or property developers." He sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. I'll start with the guy who logged your deed transfer. He used to work for one of those firms out of Houston, and rumor is he still takes consulting fees. Perfect, I said. Let's flush them out, one crooked clerk at a time. I've always believed a fence is only as strong as the bastard willing to cut through it. Turns out, some bastards wear HOA vests and carry bolt cutters. It happened just after 2 in the morning, on a Wednesday. The air was still, heavy with that humid Texas thickness that wraps around your lungs like wet wool. I was asleep on the old couch in the living room. We hadn't finished clearing the upstairs yet, when Boone let out this low, guttural snarl. Not a bark, not panic. That sound he makes when something ain't right. I was on my feet before I was fully awake, grabbing the remote to pull up the live feed from the trail cams I'd mounted along the south and east fences. Sure enough, 2 figures had breached the gate on the southeast corner. One of them had a flashlight. The other carried what looked like a long-handled tool, maybe a crowbar, maybe worse. They moved like they'd done this before. They were inside the property line, heading for the main equipment shed. I grabbed the shotgun I kept by the back door, signaled to Boone to stay close, and slipped out the side exit. I wasn't looking for a gunfight. I was looking for confirmation, proof that someone had violated my land again. And this time I wanted to catch them on camera and in the act. By the time I made it to the shed, they were gone. The padlock had been popped clean. One of the storage crates was pried open empty now. A generator, a box of electrical tools, and 3 sealed fuel cans. Gone. Worse, the west side kennel gate was hanging open, swinging in the wind like a drunk's apology. Cassie and Ranger were still inside, but one of the pups, Ranger's youngest, about 16 weeks old, was lying on his side, breathing shallow and slow, vomit in the straw. His gums were pale. I didn't even think. I scooped him up, threw him in the truck, and hauled ass to the 24-hour vet in Hamilton, 23 miles of back road, headlights cutting through the dark like a scalpel. He didn't make it. The vet said it was strychnine, classic poisoning, likely mixed in meat or a treat and tossed over the fence. I'd seen it before during my years on the force, common enough when someone wants to discourage barking in their neighborhood. Only this wasn't about barking. This was about a message. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the barn, shotgun across my lap, with Boone curled at my feet and Rachel wide-eyed and silent beside me. We didn't say much. There wasn't much to say. Next morning, I went through the footage frame by frame. One of the intruders wore a reflective vest, white striping with a barely visible patch. I zoomed in until the pixels bled together. It read, WHR Infrastructure Crew, West Hollow Ridge. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. I forwarded the footage to Carol and Trevor, then called the sheriff's office. The deputy they sent out was young, new badge, clean boots, nervous eyes. He took my statement, copied the footage, and promised they'd look into it. When I asked if they'd pursue charges, he gave me a textbook shrug. There's a complication, he said. According to our property maps, there's an old maintenance easement recorded back in 1996. Gives WHR access to the southeast quadrant of your property line for stormwater and drainage upkeep. Doesn't say it expired. I just stared at him. So you're telling me they can break in, steal my equipment, poison my dog, and you'll call it a drainage inspection? He flushed red. I'm not saying that, sir. I'm just saying that legally, right now, they may argue they had authorized access to the perimeter. That'll muddy any criminal charges. Muddy? I snapped. My dog is dead. He stammered something about how the DA would make the call, but I knew how this game worked. It was the same kind of bureaucratic fog I used to have to wade through every time some county judge had a friend who needed a favor. I called Carol again and told her about the easement. She was quiet for a moment. Jesus, she muttered. I didn't think they'd go this far. I'll pull the original deed and see if that easement was supposed to be vacated after the last plat adjustment. If it's still active, that's a hole big enough to drive a bulldozer through. Trevor called that evening with more bad news. He traced a string of internal county emails showing that a clerk in the recorder's office had flagged the easement last year for removal, but the update was never processed. The clerk was later promoted and reassigned to a state-level planning board. His replacement? A part-time intern with zero zoning experience. Meanwhile, the HOA had been quietly using that easement as a back door into neighboring properties for the past 4 years. According to Trevor, at least 2 other landowners had filed complaints that maintenance crews from WHR were entering their property without permission, but both cases were dismissed as boundary misunderstandings. Not this time. That evening, I walked the fence line myself, reinforced the broken gate, added new locks, reset the motion sensors. Then I took the camera footage and put it on a thumb drive. The next morning, I scheduled a press briefing at my gate. No more hiding behind deeds and lawyers. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd show them what it looked like when a man fights back clean, with teeth, truth, and tape. By the time I finished stringing up the extension cord for the PA system, the Texas sun had already settled into that unforgiving spot just above the tree line. Too early for evening, too late for mercy. I wore my old sheriff's department boots, scuffed and dusty, jeans that hadn't been washed in a week, and a clean collared shirt Rachel made me change into. She said if I was going to burn their house down, I should at least look like I was holding a match on camera. The gate to my ranch was flanked by 2 makeshift banners I'd slapped together that morning. Private property not for sale. And HOA trespassers will be prosecuted and possibly bitten. Boone sat at my side, tongue lolling, tail twitching like a metronome counting down to the moment I'd blow this whole thing wide open. I'd sent invites to every local outlet from Killeen to Waco, including the ones that mostly reported on county fairs and cow auctions. Didn't matter. I wasn't after national press. I wanted neighbors watching, people like me, landowners, voters, the ones who'd never be allowed in HOA meetings but still paid the price when one got too big for its britches. The first camera truck showed up 15 minutes before noon. Then another, and another. Some reporters looked bored. One was already sweating through her makeup. Then a familiar blue sedan rolled in, and I grinned. "Damn, Mac," said Trevor, stepping out in jeans and mirrored sunglasses. "You planning to run for office?" "Only office I want is one with a working coffee machine and no HOA jurisdiction." We shook hands. Carol arrived shortly after, accompanied by her paralegal and a cardboard box full of paper files. I'd told her I was going to go loud. She brought receipts. I stepped up to the makeshift podium, an overturned water trough, and tapped the mic. "My name's Ellis McBain. Some of you may know me as the former sheriff commander for Hamilton County. Some of you probably don't know me at all. But what you should know is that 3 weeks ago, I bought this land legally, through the county, with a certified title. And since the day I arrived, I've been harassed, threatened, and robbed by a homeowners association that doesn't own a damn inch of it." A few reporters perked up. Cameras clicked. I kept going. West Hollow Ridge HOA has tried to annex part of this property using fraudulent documents, including a right of first refusal agreement signed by a man who was already 6 feet under at the time. They've claimed this ranch was abandoned despite my recorded deed. They've sent crews to trespass, sabotage, and poison one of my dogs, all while citing a decades-old drainage easement that should have been voided years ago, but wasn't. Thanks to a conveniently forgotten update in the county's own system, I gestured to Trevor and Carol. What we have here is more than a neighborly dispute. It's a coordinated attempt to seize private land using corrupt ties inside the assessor's office, forged paperwork, and intimidation tactics. This ain't just happening to me, it's happened to others, and it's going to keep happening unless we bring it into the sunlight. That was Carol's cue. She stepped forward and laid out copies of the forged documents, highlighted and annotated, alongside the easement's outdated map, Trevor's call logs, and 2 affidavits from nearby landowners. The crowd got still. Then came Gustavo Ramirez. He was a soft-spoken man, maybe in his 60s, with hands like leather and eyes like steel. Owned a fruit orchard 5 miles east. We'd talked once on the phone. I hadn't expected him to show up, let alone speak. I caught their trucks on my field last year, he said, voice shaking with barely contained fury. They said they were inspecting runoff. I never gave permission. I called the sheriff. Nothing happened. He handed over a flash drive with photos and timestamps. Thought maybe now someone would care. And just like that, the dominoes started falling. Another man in the crowd, older, in work clothes, stepped forward. Then a woman from the county line, all with their own stories, all tied to West Hollow Ridge. Rachel stood off to the side the whole time, watching with crossed arms and a face that said she'd been right to tell me to shave this morning. By the end of the briefing, I had 4 confirmed cases of unlawful entry, 2 forged easement renewals, and 1 HOA legal rep who is now ducking calls from 3 local reporters. I gave one final statement before the cameras shut off. We're not asking for special treatment, just the kind every citizen deserves: protection of property, honest records, equal application of the law. I served this county. Now I'm asking it to serve me and every landowner who's been steamrolled because they didn't live behind a gated sign with a board of directors. That night, my phone didn't stop ringing. A city council member wanted to meet. A local newspaper wanted to run a Sunday feature. And somewhere in that chaos, I got a text from Trevor. You just kicked a hornet's nest in front of a live audience. Proud of you. Damn right I did. After the press conference, I thought things might go quiet for a while. Turns out, that only works in movies. In real life, when you swing a spotlight into a rat hole, the rats don't scatter. They start chewing wires. The day after we went public, someone tried to access the county recorder's database remotely. Trevor flagged the login attempt. It was routed through a masked IP, but the request targeted my parcel number, my deed, and the attached easement files. Someone was looking for weaknesses, or maybe trying to delete evidence. Too late. We'd already pulled hard copies, backups, and screenshots. Carol had 3 separate drives stored in different cities, one of them in a damn safety deposit box. Like I said, she doesn't mess around. That week, things started cracking open. The district attorney's office in Waco reached out. They'd received formal complaints from multiple landowners following our briefing. Gustavo, the orchard guy, had handed over photos showing WHR contractors cutting through his fence, complete with timestamps, license plates, and a contractor badge that traced back to a firm called Southridge Compliance. Sounded official, wasn't. Registered out of a P.O. box 2 towns over. Meanwhile, Trevor had been digging into that clerk we suspected, the one who forgot to process the easement removal. His name was Matt Carson, and on paper he was clean. But buried in an unrelated budget hearing from 2 years back was a notation about a consulting stipend paid by a developer group called Hollow West Holdings. Guess who funded the creation of the West Hollow Ridge HOA? We pulled email logs, cross-checked vendor payments, and found that same developer group had donated heavily to the county judge's re-election campaign the year the easement error occurred. It was starting to look less like a clerical mistake and more like a planned exploit, one that allowed the HOA to slowly creep their reach onto adjacent properties using outdated or falsified public records. Carol called a meeting. Just me, her, Trevor, and a whiteboard, with more red string than a conspiracy theorist's attic. Here's what we had. The original right of first refusal contract was a forgery. dead man's signature, expired notary stamp. The bankruptcy trustee had been in regular contact with WHR's legal firm in the weeks leading up to the auction. The clerk, Matt Carson, knowingly left the easement record untouched despite a directive to clear it and had financial ties to developers aligned with WHR. Multiple neighbors reported similar trespassing and intimidation tactics, and at least one had sold their land at a loss after months of harassment. I'll be honest, I was angry, not just for myself, for the damn principal. These weren't petty HOA disputes about mailbox colors or lawn heights. This was corporate-level land fraud, executed through county offices and polished with legalese. I asked Carol, "How far do we take this?" She leaned forward, resting both palms on the table. "As far as it'll go. We file a motion for a forensic audit of all property transactions involving West Hollow Ridge over the last 10 years. We notify the Texas State Bar about their legal counsel. And we send a formal complaint to the State Land Commissioner." "And the criminal part?" I asked. Trevor grinned. Already in motion, I looped in the Rangers. Now, if you've never worked with the Texas Rangers, let me paint a picture. They don't knock. They don't warn. They show up quiet and fast like a cold front with a badge. 2 days later, I heard through a contact that a ranger named Delano had walked into the county recorder's office, flashed a badge, and asked to speak to Matt Carson in private. By lunch, Matt had retired early. By evening, his office was under lock, and 2 county employees were being interviewed off-site. The feds weren't far behind. The Department of Housing and Urban Development wanted to know how a suburban HOA was using development grants to build public wellness facilities on land it didn't own. Turns out WHR had applied for state infrastructure funds, twice, using maps that included my property as pending community assets. I nearly choked when Carol showed me the application packet. There it was, in black and white, my creek, my southern pasture, labeled Phase 3 Outdoor Therapeutic Complex. Hell of a vision they had, I muttered. Pity it's not theirs. All of this was building toward something. We weren't just swatting flies anymore. We were cutting through the web. But like any dying beast, WHR wasn't going quietly. Late one night, Rachel and I were sitting on the porch with the dogs when her phone buzzed. She frowned. "What the hell is a neighborhood behavioral report?" she asked. I took the phone. It was an email from a WHR Gmail account. It listed me as a disruptive resident, citing unauthorized signage, hostile rhetoric, and attempted intimidation of board members. I laughed. They're trying to gaslight me into thinking I live in their fantasy subdivision. But then I saw the CC list. Our insurance company, our power co-op, our vet. They were trying to smear me, quietly, institutionally, hoping someone would flag me as unstable or uncooperative. It was subtle, but it was war. Carol filed a cease and desist the next morning. Trevor passed the email up the chain. I, meanwhile, started preparing for the next press event. This time, I wasn't just going to talk about what they'd done to me. I was going to talk about what they'd done to everyone. If the first press conference rattled their cage, the second one lit the damn thing on fire. This time, we didn't set up at my gate. We went big, county courthouse steps, marble columns and all, with more cameras than I'd seen since the mayor's DUI got leaked. Carol had coordinated with 2 state reps and a legal advocacy group out of Austin that specialized in HOA abuse cases. Hell, we even had a podium with a seal on it. Made me feel like I should be wearing a tie or announcing someone's indictment. Spoiler alert, both happened before the month was out. I stepped up to the mic with a new set of documents in my hand and a mission in my gut. This wasn't about my land anymore. This was about the system that allowed people like Grace Vanderlee and her HOA board to weaponize bureaucracy, bury small landowners under paperwork, and manipulate public infrastructure grants to fund their HOA spas. I held up a copy of the state development grant West Hollow Ridge had applied for, one that listed my pasture as a planned recreational facility and Gustavo's Orchard as a natural integration zone. In case anyone's wondering, I said into the mic, they never asked me about that. Reporters scribbled, cameras flashed, but the real bomb dropped when Trevor walked up and handed me a folder mid-speech. I opened it, read it, and paused. Then I held it up. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "this is an internal audit summary from the Texas State Land Office. It shows that West Hollow Ridge HOA has submitted 12 fraudulent plats in the last 7 years, all reflecting minor boundary corrections. that resulted in, coincidentally, expanded HOA green space and narrower private lots. Dead silence from the crowd, then murmurs, then an audible, "What the hell?" from someone in the back. Carol stepped up next and did what she does best, outlined every legal breach, contract violation, and fraudulent act like a prosecutor lining up dominoes. She talked about the notarized lie tied to a dead man's hand. She referenced the easement manipulation that allowed HOA agents to enter properties in the dead of night. She introduced 2 more victims who'd come forward since the last event, one whose barn was bulldozed by mistake, and another who'd lost water access after WHR rerouted runoff to protect community trails. By the time she was done, the cameras had caught fire, and Grace Vanderlee's name was trending on social media like she'd run over a puppy with a golf cart, which, honestly, would have been less evil. Later that week, Texas Rangers executed a search warrant on the HOA offices. Word was, Delano walked in mid-board meeting and shut it down with a sentence. "You've been doing business with public land. Now the public wants receipts." They seized hard drives, paper records, even personal laptops from the 2 board lawyers. WHR tried to cry foul, claimed targeted harassment, claimed state overreach, claimed lack of due process. Turns out the judge disagreed. A week later, federal agents showed up. Not just Rangers, this time it was folks with initials on their jackets. HUD, DOJ, IRS, the full alphabet. Grace wasn't just in trouble for land manipulation anymore. They'd found evidence of tax evasion, falsified payrolls, even fraudulent contracts submitted under the Community Wellness Fund. My favorite detail? That wellness spa they kept mentioning? They'd already started billing the state for it. The only thing on my land was a broken fence, a pile of stolen gravel, and the memory of a poisoned puppy. They'd billed the state for it twice. Rachel and I watched it unfold from the porch like some kind of backwoods reality show. She handed me a glass of sweet tea and said, "You know, this might be the first HOA scandal with its own damn soundtrack." Trevor confirmed over the phone that a federal grand jury had been convened. Matt Carson, the county clerk who forgot the easement cancellation, had turned state's witness. His testimony connected 4 county officials, 2 private developers, and 3 HOA board members, including Grace, to a scheme involving land reclassification, quiet title manipulation, and something called digital lot slippage, which sounded like a software glitch, but was actually intentional tampering with GIS data. "You're not just a landowner anymore," Trevor said. "You're ground zero." I could feel it, like pressure in the air before a thunderstorm. My name was on witness lists, subpoenas, case briefs. Hell, I was being called to testify before a state property commission about emerging trends in non-consensual HOA boundary expansion. Fancy words for legalized theft. But the best moment? The one that made all the late nights, legal bills, and dead dogs worth it. I got a call from an attorney representing the HOA's insurance underwriter. They were cutting ties. Turns out being involved in multi-level fraud violates something in the fine print. Who knew? Justice doesn't always kick in the door like a movie scene. Sometimes it walks into court wearing loafers and reading glasses with a case file 6 inches thick and a judge who doesn't smile. But when it hits, damn, it hits like a freight train with a badge. The first shoe dropped with the indictment of Grace Vanderlee, president of West Hollow Ridge HOA and self-appointed queen of suburban conquest. 3 counts: conspiracy to commit land fraud, willful misrepresentation of property boundaries, and abuse of public development funds. She was arrested at her home during a board brunch, which I heard about from a very enthusiastic neighbor who called me the minute the squad cars rolled up. Grace apparently tried to claim diplomatic immunity as an elected HOA officer. The cops laughed hard. Next came the 2 HOA attorneys, smart suits with snake oil smiles. Turns out they'd been recycling legal boilerplates from unrelated properties, swapping names and parcel numbers like some kind of land-grabbing Mad Libs. Carol showed me the comparison charts. Identical clauses, identical errors, all signed off by their firm. Both were disbarred within the week. One turned state's witness. The other tried to flee to Florida. Didn't make it past Texarkana. Then there was Matt Carson, the clerk. Good old Matt. Remember him? The guy who missed deleting that expired drainage easement. He took a plea deal in exchange for flipping on the developers, 2 of whom were already under IRS audit for unrelated shell companies tied to community beautification funds that, ironically, paid for a yacht. The state issued temporary seizure orders on WHR's bank accounts. Their assets froze faster than a margarita in a walk-in freezer. HOA operations ground to a halt. No security patrols, no lawn service, no monthly brunches about mailbox color violations. And while all that was happening, something even sweeter hit my inbox. An official apology letter from the Texas State Land Office, admitting they had failed to flag the boundary discrepancies in time, and confirming my title had always been valid, binding, and unassailable. They offered me a compensation settlement, 6 figures. I damn near choked on my coffee. Then came civil court. Carol filed on my behalf for damages, property destruction, emotional distress, cost of legal defense, and loss of livestock. Boone's pup rest his little soul. We asked for fair restitution. The jury gave us triple. It was more than money. It was the court saying, "We saw what they did. We know who you are, and they can't touch you again." Part of the judgment included a mandatory public acknowledgement published in 3 newspapers stating that West Hollow Ridge HOA acted outside its legal authority, forged documents to seize private land, and caused harm to neighboring property owners. Grace's name was in bold, but my favorite part, the HOA was forced to dissolve, disbanded, dismantled, by court order. No more board meetings, no more newsletters, no more gated power trips. Every house under that HOA's flag was now just another private homeowner, subject to county code like the rest of us. That night, I walked the perimeter of my ranch. Just me, the dogs, and a brand new 8-foot bronze security gate I'd had installed where the old wire one used to hang. Laser sensors, reinforced anchors, enough voltage to make a raccoon rethink its life. Above it, on a polished cedar sign, were the words, "Fort McBain Ranch, private property. All trespassers will be bitten, then prosecuted." The local sheriff's office sent me a letter thanking me for my cooperation with the state. So did the Rangers. I even got a call from an assistant AG who asked if I'd be willing to testify in front of the state commission about how rural landowners are being targeted by corrupt HOAs. "You're a case study now, Mr. McBain," he said. I laughed. "Guess I'll need a better hat." One by one, the other victims started seeing movement on their cases too. Gustavo got a settlement from the state and a formal boundary reinstatement. The couple whose water was rerouted got funded to restore their well. And best of all, the land that WHR claimed for their spa complex returned fully. I didn't sell. I didn't split it. I built on it. We broke ground on a training center, part kennel, part facility for working dogs and law enforcement units. Boone and Cassie now had full runs, an obstacle course, and a climate-controlled bunkhouse. Local sheriff's departments started calling to schedule training weekends. Even the state K-9 unit sent a scout. Turns out there's high demand for a place that teaches dogs to bite criminals and sniff out bullshit. A month after the final court decision, I got a knock on my gate. Not a car horn, not headlights. A knock. It was just before sundown, and the dogs were already inside after training drills. Rachel was inside too, prepping dinner, chili, the kind you don't eat so much as survive. I stepped out onto the porch, shotgun still racked from the day's fieldwork, and looked through the camera feed on the monitor. There she stood, Grace Vanderlee. No blazer, no pearls, just a worn cardigan, and eyes that looked about 20 years older than the last time I saw them blinking smugly behind HOA podiums. She wasn't holding a clipboard this time, just a folded envelope and the kind of silence that creeps in when people know the ground beneath them ain't theirs anymore. I didn't open the gate, just flicked on the speaker. "Grace," I said, calm. "You lost." She looked straight at the camera. "I know." For a beat, we both stood there in our respective silences, hers heavy with regret, mine full of concrete steel and well-fed German shepherds. "I didn't come for a fight," she said. "I came to say I was wrong." I almost laughed, not because I didn't believe her, but because for the first time in this whole mess, her voice didn't have that poisonous edge. It sounded human, defeated, still proud, sure, but less imperial. She held up the envelope. "This is a letter. No lawyers, no tricks. You don't have to read it. I just didn't want to leave without facing you." I could have ignored her, could have turned up the speaker and let Boone bark her into next week. But I didn't. I buzzed the outer gate, just enough for her to slip the envelope into the mailbox slot. Nothing more. She nodded once, turned, and walked back to the curb where an old Honda waited. Not a Lexus, not a black SUV. just some regular-ass car with a missing hubcap. I didn't open the letter for 2 days. When I did, it was handwritten, no signature, just 2 pages of reflection, excuses, and finally, quiet surrender. We thought we were building a perfect community, but perfection is a lie that requires erasing anything unpredictable. People like you were unpredictable, so we tried to erase you. I lost myself chasing order. I hope you never do. That was it. I didn't reply. Some things don't need a comeback. Instead, I focused on the ranch. The training center was up and running. We called it McBain Tactical Canine and already had contracts lined up with 2 sheriff departments and a private security firm. Boone was semi-retired, mostly teaching young dogs how to herd and intimidate with the right posture. Cassie had taken over field drills. Ranger was on narcotic scent training. Every dog had a job, every pup had a future. Rachel handled logistics, training schedules, invoices, local contacts. I stuck to land work and field time, felt like breathing again. Neighbors stopped by now and then, not to complain, but to ask if I could help train their shepherds too. Gustavo even brought us a crate of peaches as a thank you, said the orchard's boundaries had finally been corrected and his grandson was applying to A&M's ag program. Some days, I'd still walk the southern ridge where the spa complex was supposed to be. I planted wildflower seed out there now. Come spring, it'll be nothing but color, blue bonnets, Indian paintbrush, black-eyed Susans. Let the land breathe again. There's no HOA here anymore. No board, no bylaws, just land, law, and the people willing to defend both. And at the end of my new gravel road, behind a gate that cost more than my first patrol car, hangs the sign that says everything I needed to say. Welcome to Fort McBain Ranch, private property. All trespassers will be bitten, then prosecuted. I don't sleep with the shotgun beside the door anymore, but I still clean it. Some habits are worth keeping.